Hello and welcome to Motorsport Week's brand new weekly F1 podcast series, that is Motorsport Week, the show where we discuss about the latest that is happening in the world of Formula 1. Tom Cairns, your host, alongside Ed Spencer, Hannah Bethurk and Will Knight. Over the course of this episode, we will be looking at who is driving where for 2021, where the F1 circus will be heading to this season, and what you need to know before pre-season testing commences this weekend in Bahrain. Good evening, Ed. Good evening, Will. Good evening, Hannah. It's great to be back. You know, it's familiar faces from the support series of last year, and it looks as though that Formula One is revving to go for 2021 with such a long calendar. Ed, how are you feeling for this year?
I'm ready for it. I feel this is going to be exciting. Yeah, it's the last year of the current generation cars. A lot of new faces going to a lot of different teams, different variations of driver lineup. We've got the excitement of whether we will get a freeway battle for second. We've got the Lewis Hamilton saga, whether this will be his last year or whether he will go on to win 8th, 9th, maybe 10th World Championship. We've got new races. We've got returning races. It's going to be a lot of fun. Won't be as unpredictable as last year, but it will be a very enjoyable season. And I think it could be one of Formula One's best yet.
Yeah. Well, 2020 was fascinating, you know, considering how tough of a year it has been for all of us. Around the world, but we were privileged to see maybe not as close to the championship as we would have liked, but some of the races we had, my goodness me, if that's anything to go by, we could be in for a humdinger of a 2021 campaign.
I think last year, especially with the global situation, Formula One maybe sort of understood it had to put on a bit more of a show, and the drivers did as well. So I think we definitely had a bit of a luxury last year of exciting races and close battles, and I really don't think that we're going to see anything different this season. I think it's the season I'm most excited to see since probably 2012, in all honesty. I think that season will be replicated here. We've got so many teams. I reckon multiple teams will be higher than everyone is placing them. A couple in particular in my mind, but we'll move on to that later. I think definitely Lewis Hamilton will have a fight on his hands, and it won't be as easy as last year for him.
Hannah, Lewis Hamilton has signed a new one-year deal, but in regards to this year, how close do you think the pecking order will be? Because there's quite a number of changes to the grid, with drivers moving across different teams. Some teams have sort of changed names as well. We've got McLaren switching to the Mercedes engine from Renault. What can we expect from this year?
I would say this year is going to prove to be incredibly interesting. I feel like Mercedes will probably continue to be the front runners that they have been for the past couple of years. However, I do think the battle between them and the midfield pack will be a lot tighter. I think Red Bull having Sergio Perez in the lineup could only help them move closer to Mercedes. I feel like McLaren and Aston Martin are definitely going to be two to watch. And I also think we've got a couple of exciting rookies on the grid as well that we want to definitely look out for. So I think, although we'll probably still have Mercedes dominate and the likes of Haas and Alfa Romeo at the back, that kind of midfield pack from second downwards could be a very tight battle and should provoke some very interesting racing.
Yeah, and to run down who is driving where for 2021, Mercedes keep their successful partnership of Lewis Hamilton, who's now gone in for his 8th World Championship, which will be a record-breaking title for him. He's alongside Valtteri Bottas, who goes into his 5th season in Formula 1. Red Bull, Max Verstappen stays for another year with the Milton Keynes-based squad. He'll be joined by another new teammate, that is the Mexican Sergio Perez, moving across from Racing Point. At McLaren, Daniel Ricardo has moved from Renault to link up with Lando Norris. At Aston Martin, taking over from where Racing Point left off, Sebastian Vettel moving across from Ferrari to join Lance Stroll. At Alpine, now known as that, from Renault, they have Fernando Alonso rejoining the sport after 2 years on the sidelines. He joins with Esteban Ocon. At Ferrari, they have Charles Leclerc, who is joined by another new teammate, that is Carlos Sainz. AlphaTauri, Pierre Gasly, going into his 4th full season in Formula 1. He's joined by a Japanese rookie, that is Yuki Tsunoda. Next up is Alfa Romeo, with Kimi Raikkonen going into yet another season as the most experienced driver of all time. Antonio Giovinazzi is his teammate. At Haas, they have an old rookie lineup, that is Mick Schumacher, the reigning F2 champion, alongside the controversial figure that is Nikita Mazepin. Finally, Williams have George Russell and Nicholas Latifi making up their payroll. So, Will, it's an interesting lineup. Let's begin with Mercedes, because Lewis Hamilton has been in talks with over the New Deal. The New Deal's done, but there's some rumours going around saying that he may not be as happy with the deal as they would have liked. How did you perceive it?
I think that's exactly the case, in my opinion. I think he probably didn't get as much money as he wanted in terms of, we all know Lewis demands a massive paycheck in terms of 40 million, 50 million, possibly even 60. And obviously we had all of these rumours floating around. Most of them were most likely a load of rubbish and nonsense, like apparently wanting $100 million in certain cases I saw. But he obviously didn't want, though. He understands the situation, but nonetheless, it's only a 1 year deal, and we haven't seen that in such a long time for Lewis. I'm not entirely sure if he's ever seen that in his Formula One career, a 1 year deal. So I think his eyes are looking elsewhere in terms of other things he can be doing. He's got his fashion brand Hamilton, his new Extreme E team. Last year we saw him taking a massive stand against societal issues. So I think this year could possibly even be Lewis's last.
Ed, how do you react to that? And is this a hint that this could be Lewis Hamilton's year, or do you feel that he's wanting to sort of add more, prove more than what he's already done in the sport? And to be honest, he's already proven how good he is. It's just how long is he prepared to stay?
He doesn't have anything to prove. No, he doesn't. I think he's already broken nearly every record. He just wants to win the 8th World Championship, and then he's pretty much, on top of the pedestal. The whole contract saga reminded me a tremendous amount of Ayrton Senna and Ron Dennis in 1993, when they were up to the last minute and they were very close to not even agreeing terms until Senna offered wanted $1 million per race, which Dennis agreed. It is a hint that he could be retiring, but there's, it doesn't also rule out the rumour that he might move elsewhere. It seems shocking to think Lewis Hamilton would leave Mercedes, considering the dynasty that he has built at Mercedes. But Lawrence Stroll has expressed his interest in signing Hamilton, and it's not without the realm of possibility that Hamilton may leave. He may decide, I want to win 10 and do another season elsewhere. But at the moment, it's 50-50. I'm not sure where we'll be with Hamilton. I think we'll know a bit more what he's going to do. I would say by Silverstone, because Silverstone is his spiritual home, considering he has the fans on his side. He's won the British Grand Prix so many times, and he has so loved there. So we will probably get an announcement, I would say by Silverstone, on what he's going to do. But the 1 year deal is a very eyebrow raising moment, I feel.
Yeah, Hannah, it's a really important year for Mercedes, for both Hamilton and Bottas, and it's obviously the last year before the new race come in. What is their objective for this year, apart from going for the championship?
I would say probably the biggest objective is deciding the path. I feel like this year, as the others have both said, will prove probably pivotal in Hamilton's career, whether he gets that 8th world title, but also for the future of Mercedes. It was interesting seeing the debates around whether Hamilton was going to sign, because this season has been the first time I've probably ever felt that Mercedes see a future without Hamilton in it. Previously, it's been Hamilton has been the necessary component, whereas now, with the rumours surrounding whether George Russell will join the team, the future is increasingly moving away from Hamilton, and Mercedes at least seem to have the common sense and knowledge that he is not going to race in the series forever, and to look forward. I also think Hamilton could prove to be both Valtteri Bottas's nail in the coffin and his saving grace. And ultimately, if Hamilton chooses to stay, Bottas will go. If Hamilton chooses to leave or doesn't resign, then Bottas could be saved on the account of needing an experienced hand. But I think for Mercedes, now more than ever, it'll rack up another world title, add one to the record books, but make sure they start off on the correct foot heading into the 2022 season. Because we all know, as soon as a regulation change happens, the top dog changes with it.
Yeah. Moving on to Red Bull, Max Verstappen, who has won 10 Grand Prix, I think. It's 9 or 10. I think he's won 9, actually, because he's got the same number as Bottas. I'll have a think about that. But it's a pivotal year for Red Bull. It's their last season with their engine partners, Honda. Can they really, really push Mercedes this year? Because they've got a fantastic lineup of Verstappen and Perez. But how close are they going to be, Will, in regards? Because there's no doubt I think they'll achieve race wins. It's just how often will they achieve them?
I'm, on the other hand, towards everyone sort of getting quite excited for Verstappen and Perez at Red Bull and this new Honda engine, mainly due to the fact that Honda, although it's come a long way, a really long way since the days of 2015 GP2 engine, Button and Alonso barely qualifying in Q2 sometimes, that package is unreliable still. We saw last year so many instances where the Red Bull and Honda package just wasn't working. Mugello, Verstappen tried to get off the line and went nowhere. He had a good start and then just fell back and ended up in the mid-pack where he got taken out by Pierre Gasly and Kimi Raikkonen, I think it was, on the run down to turn 2. So if I were to look at Verstappen and Perez, I think, yes, they will have pace, but whether the reliability of that package can be sustained going into the future, especially with this new Red Bull powertrain situation, it's a real question in my mind whether they're going in the right direction for their future.
It's Sergio Perez finally getting a big opportunity within a top team. When I say a top team, a team that's potentially going to be going for race wins. He had a great time with Sauber, McLaren not so good, and with Force India and Racing Point, he had a phenomenal spell over there. So I feel that Perez has got a great opportunity to shine and take the fight to Verstappen, unlike how Gasly and Albon have done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that with the fact, if we look back at Sergio Perez's racing career, I don't think he was really ready for McLaren. I think he had done well at Sauber, but I think he needed more time, and then the plan would be to go to Ferrari. But Force India Racing Point made him a very mature, very well-rounded driver. This is a huge opportunity for Checo because of the fact that he's been at Racing Point. They haven't looked like winning races until last year. They haven't looked even close, really, some days. So this is his huge opportunity, and he's earned it. He's earned his place. He won a Grand Prix. He's done well last year. The car was excellent, and he made it even more sensational by his driving skills. I think he's going to do well this year. I've really got a feeling he will give Max the push he needs because, with no disrespect to Alex Albon and Pierre Gasly, I think they could have done with a year or two at AlphaTauri, or Scuderia Toro-Rosso as it was called back then, to really just become a full, well-rounded driver. And that's probably one of the reasons why they were spat out at their time. And that's why probably Verstappen got a bit lax, I would say. So with Checo, I think he'll push Max, he'll push the team even further, they'll push even closer to Mercedes. I think he'll do very well at Red Bull. Whether Max and Sergio will clash, however, is an interesting point. Because Max has been top dog of that team for a number of years. Checo comes in, doesn't have any pressure on him. Could get very feisty. But it's an exciting driver lineup.
Hannah, it seems as though that Red Bull's philosophy is having the driver being ahead more regularly than the other. But is it a gamble for Red Bull to take on such a driver like Sergio Perez with so much talent within it? Do Red Bull need to take this gamble to have two top drivers within the same team to really take the fight to Mercedes?
Absolutely. I think any team that wants to be at the front of the pack ultimately does need two top drivers. If you look at, say, for example, at Mercedes, as much as we probably all criticise Valtteri Bottas, he is a strong driver in that car. He'd probably be a lot better off with George Russell, but that's by the by. And the problem is with Red Bull at the moment, they can't seem to close the gap aerodynamically or through their engine. They haven't got the horsepower needed to bring the fight to Mercedes in that front, so they need two top drivers to be able to drive the legs off that car. If you look, for example, when they had issues with Pierre Gasly in the car and with Alex Albon, they lost crucial points in the constructors, crucial points on that track to stave off other cars, and the likelihood is this season is going to see the midfield become incredibly close up to the front of the pack. They need those two strong drivers to ultimately hold them off, but it will be interesting to see how Perez kind of fits into the dynamic of the team. Because ultimately, he's well respected within the paddock, and he's got nothing to lose, so I don't think it'll be a very harmonious relationship in Red Bull. I think Perez will probably drive Max Verstappen and give it all he's got, but I think overall Red Bull have at least had the sense now to realise that having one top driver doesn't work unless you are directly at the front of the pack.
And going on to McLaren next, we've got Daniel Ricardo moving across to another team now. I think that's his fifth different team He's racing in Formula 1 now. But for a team like McLaren, who have had a great last couple of years with the lineup of Sainz and Norris, Ricardo moving over there to a team who are now using the Mercedes engine, McLaren have got a golden opportunity to shine this year and aiming for that elusive race victory, something that they haven't had since 2012. And how did you feel when Ricardo had announced that he was going to McLaren? Because did that come as a surprise to you? Because he had a phenomenal season with Renault last year, but has he taken a huge risk with going to McLaren, or do you think he's made the right decision?
I think he's definitely taken a huge risk. I think with any driver that moves teams, it ultimately is a risk because, for example, look at when Hamilton moved to Mercedes. You never know whether it's going to pay off or not, only with the benefit of hindsight can we say now that certain gambles have. But I do think it is actually his best chance of fighting for World Championships since his days at Red Bull. I feel like, judging by the progress McLaren have made under Zak Brown and Andreas Seidel, they've increasingly looked towards the future and been able to progress each year, and they don't rest on their laurels in the way that I feel Renault, now Alpine, do. I think Alpine, to be honest, I don't think he'd have had a very high likelihood is they'd have got Fernando Alonso in alongside him, and it probably wouldn't have been the most harmonious relationship within the team. But at McLaren, he can thrive in a positive atmosphere, and I think McLaren car might suit his driving style a bit better. And to be honest, looking towards the future, McLaren have got their goals probably set with that Mercedes engine more on 2022 and the future there. And he knows full and well that 2022 will be his best chance to fight for a world championship.
Yeah. Will, how do you respond to that? Because Ricardo has, proved himself that he can fight at the front. He's got this tenacity to really fight it out with the top guns. How do McLaren give him the car he needs? Because there's no doubt they've got the Mercedes engine. The car clearly is aerodynamically efficient. Now it's just very much down to Daniel himself to produce the goods like he did with Renault last year.
Realistically, I think I can only agree with Hannah, to be honest, because that Mercedes package, the car is not built around the Mercedes package. They've had to spend their development tokens on fitting that power unit into the rear of the car. They've had to adjust it. We saw the technical elements of it haven't changed that much in terms of the front. And in all honesty, I think McLaren will be aiming for 2022 purely because this season is a risk in terms of they were hoping when they signed this Mercedes deal, they'd just be able to fit it into the new car. They'd be able to design the new car around the Mercedes power unit and push for championships in 2021. But the fact that they've got Ricardo on their books now, he's going to be able to help Lando Norris develop as a driver. And in my opinion, like Hannah just said, Ricardo should be fighting for a world championship if McLaren can do this properly in 2022. But in terms of 2021, I think they'll end development early because what's the point in developing a car that you're only going to finish third in if you can develop a car which you can finish first in? And I think they'll be aiming for fourth place this year.
McLaren are looking strong, to be honest with you, with the lineup. I mean, we haven't had pre-season testing yet in Bahrain, so there's that to look forward to at the weekend. How soon do you think McLaren will switch to 2022? Because I'd love to see them, perform really, really well this year. But for the sake of the new regs, this year could be a sort of more of a consolidatory year.
Yeah, I think really McLaren should be switching around. I'd say Silverstone time because that is the midpoint of the season. If McLaren haven't won a race yet, or if they haven't got a podium yet, if they're not challenging Mercedes frequently, then they might as well give up development and start focusing on the 22 car because there's no point developing a car that's just going to come third. You're basically wasting time. And if you can give Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris the car they need and potentially win the championship, it'll be all worth it. So I think they should bring in upgrades for the start of the season for the first flyweight and then for Imola, Portimao. And then when we come down to Spain, it should start to slow down. And then if by Silverstone they haven't won a race yet, they should just phase it out and focus on the 22 regulations, which I think most teams will be doing. But, the teams at the back, I don't see many teams making that amount of improvements.
Going on to what was Racing Point, now Aston Martin, Sebastian Vettel joining a team that is fitted with the Mercedes engine for the very first time in his Formula One career. And it's a golden opportunity for Vettel to shine. I mean, the car looks good, but is it competitive enough?
I think it's been a long time since the pink Mercedes rumours of last year. They've developed that car in their own route, and now they've got a full-time world champion on their books. No disrespect to Sergio Perez, but Vettel is a full-time world champion. He's won championships with Red Bull. He's won Grand Prix. He's won 53, 52 more than Sergio Perez. So in my opinion, the only option was to go with Sebastian for this year. He's got the experience to develop the car. He's got the experience to develop Stroll. And what more would the team owner want than to improve his son's racecraft to make him become world champion? That is the ultimate dream of Lance and most likely his father. And the fact that they can do it with this iconic brand and with a four-time world champion who is just as iconic as Aston Martin in Formula One, if not more, it's a no-brainer. I think they will be competitive. I think, in all honesty, they'll be challenging with Red Bull, maybe even Mercedes at some points. That is a bit of a bold statement, but at the end of the day, if they can make that car work in the way that they want it to, I don't see why they can't challenge, possibly even for second. I think they'll maintain what will be third for most of the season, but I think they'll be aiming for the second row of the grid this year.
And I think that's a relatively good objective. Hannah, would you agree with that? And is Aston Martin's goal to get onto the second row more often, or is it more about getting the race victory?
I would say, to be honest, getting on the front row more often than not, to be honest. I feel like Aston Martin, I think Lawrence Stroll's a very pragmatic man. He recognises the fact that, obviously, with the future development, and he sees a long-term future in the team, he would not have brought Aston Martin into Formula One if he didn't think the team's long-term future was in it. Ultimately, he knows is get on those front rows, pick up them podiums more regularly, because ultimately, one race victory matters. But if you can get a consistent level of podiums, to be honest, and maybe demote Red Bull on occasions, that is more likely to allow them to usurp them in the constructor standings. I feel like it should be an interesting situation, because whether Sergio Perez takes a longer time to develop and fit into Red Bull than Sebastian Vettel does at Aston Martin will be kind of the best comparison. I also feel like for Sebastian Vettel, this is a golden opportunity for him. Ultimately, he, as much as he's a four-time world champion and an incredible driver, there are a lot of people that have said he doesn't deserve to be on the grid. His reputation at the end of his Ferrari career was in shreds, partially due to Ferrari and ultimately due to the fact that Charles Leclerc could outdrive him in the car. But he knows in that environment, Aston Martin, he can thrive and develop a race-winning car for the future. It kind of reminds me a little bit, to be honest, of when Michael Schumacher joined Mercedes. If you look back over a decade now, he was able to develop that car to allow it to win world championships. I don't think it'll be winning one immediately, but hopefully it'll be able to develop it over the next, say, 2 to 3 years to get them to the level. And if Mercedes drop off in 2022, I full on reckon Aston Martin will be primed to snatch first place in the constructors.
And according to motorsportweek.com, Ed, Otmar Safnauer, who is the team principal of the Aston Martin squad, he believes that the team can challenge for the title within the next 3 to 5 years. And with Lance Stroll within the team, who is going to his 5th season in Formula One, you have to say this is his best opportunity to even win a race.
For sure. Lance has proven himself over time that he is no slouch. A lot of people used to say that he was a pay driver and he wasn't good enough. Well, last season I think proved a lot of people wrong that he can run with those guys at the front. If you remember, his pole lap at Turkey was scintillatingly good. It's such awful conditions which even the best struggled to get the hang of. So I think this is his best chance to win for sure. He's got the best car at the moment. He's got one of the best cars on the grid at the moment, barring the Mercedes. He's getting much more mature at his driving. He's not going for silly moves. Aston Martin are going to keep developing. They're only going to increase their involvement in Formula One. He's going to have the coaching of a 4-time world champion who, I might add, I think it was completely wrong for people to slander this man who has won 4 world championships, but there were probably people 30 years ago saying Alain Prost didn't deserve to replace Nigel Mansell-Williams back in 1992. Obviously, these people got proved badly wrong when Prost went on to World Championship. So I think Lance can do it this year. I really do. I think he can possibly win a race. But I think 2022, 2023, he should be consistently challenging for wins. But all that will depend on how Aston develop from here and how good the Mercedes engine is.
Yeah. Alpine are the next team we're going to discuss, particularly Fernando Alonso, who returns after a 2-year retirement. He is alongside Esteban Ocon. And what really is Fernando Alonso's target, Ed? Because he wants to win a world championship, which I can't see that happening this year, but it's more about 22, I think, than 21 for him.
He's got to hope Renault pulls something out of the bag for 2022, because 2021 will not be his year. Let's be brutally honest. It will be a year of development. It'll be a year of learning for him. He has to relearn basically how Formula One works, but just after being 2 years away. I think he's made a big gamble coming back to Formula One with Alpine, considering that at the time when the driver market was really in full flow, there was a number of seats available. Ferrari was a potential opportunity. McLaren was still there. So it is a big gamble for Fernando. He's got to hope, however, Renault get their package right if he wants to win another championship. And he's given himself such a short amount of time, considering he's only agreed to a 2-year contract. He has to hit the ground running in 2022. Otherwise, this will all really be for nothing. And that's not what Fernando Alonso does. Fernando Alonso never enters a project half-hearted. He always does it fully. He always does it with every bone in his body. So he's just got to get his head down this year, take everything in. Then when we start learning about the new regulations, he needs to throw himself into that. And then maybe 22, 23, that'll be his year. But I think this year will be a bit of a challenge. But if he beats Esteban Ocon, which will probably be his only objective, it should be a mission accomplished.
Yeah. Will, do you back the idea of this new sort of Alpine outfit? Still based in Enstone, of course. But what do you think the sort of objective will be for Alpine in the long term?
Same as Renault. It's the same team. I say the same team. They've changed half the management. But I think with this new fantastic management scheme, they've got, I think, Laurent Rossi. I think that's how you pronounce it. So I'm not very good at French pronunciation. I think I proved that with my GCSEs. But anyway, and then Davide Brivio, obviously coming in from Suzuki, MotoGP. He won world championships with that team. There is so much hype around it. And Fernando's no slouch. He is a 2-time world champion, and he will be pushing that team to their limits. And although maybe perhaps Fernando will be going over that limit, like we've seen in the past, maybe clashing with Ocon or clashing with the management, at the end of the day, he will provide good results for that team. He is a world champion. He's a world-class driver. He's won in so many different categories, and I think it's something we can really look forward to this year.
And Esteban Ocon, we didn't see too much of him last year. We didn't really see too much of him until the latter part of the season, partly demonstrated by his podium finish in the Sakir Grand Prix. Can he really outqualify Alonso more often than not?
To be honest, I don't rate Ocon at all, so I'm going to say I do not think he will be able to outqualify Fernando Alonso. Do I think Fernando Alonso is as good as he was previously last time he was with Renault? No. But he is a much more talented, much more adaptable driver than Ocon is. Ocon has talent, but you can tell, I think possibly that even Mercedes don't rate his talent, because previously he was a Mercedes junior and was kind of seen as next in line to overtake or to take Hamilton's seat at the team, but now he seems to have been jumped by George Russell, and that's indicative of the fact that he just doesn't seem to have that same level of racecraft and drive that a lot of the other drivers on the grid have. He was, to be honest, outclassed by Daniel Ricciardo last year. And yes, I know it was his first year back with the team after losing his seat at Racing Point. However, he needed to be able to adapt more quickly, and Daniel just was able to outperform him. And I would argue Fernando Alonso is a lot stronger of a driver. If I was Esteban personally, I'd be worried about my future in Formula One, because you've got a lot of talented juniors coming up, especially from Alpine's junior programme, as well as the fact that there are several probably just as experienced talented drivers on the grid, such as Pierre Gasly, that would be itching to take that seat next year. So unless he can outclass Alonso, I think he'll be looking at getting losing his seat at the end of 2021.
it's going to be a tough season for Ocon. He's going to be very much under pressure, I think, to outshine Fernando Alonso. And if he can do that on merit, then that will most certainly do his future within the team or in Formula One. Good. Anyway, but we've got a long way to go yet in the year anyway for Ocon to make that happen. Next up is Ferrari. Now, last year Ferrari had enjoyed their worst season for 40 years. The car was just poorly aerodynamically efficient, not enough engine power, and it's just where did the problems lie? I mean, it can't get much worse for Ferrari, Will, because they've got to bounce back this year. Now they've got Carlos Sainz joining the team alongside Charles Leclerc, who was one of the best drivers last year in a car which was so inferior. Where do Ferrari stand in comparison to the competition in 21?
Well, fingers crossed they'll be better than last year, because they can't exactly get much worse, to be honest. It was their worst season since 1980, that terrible year after they won the World Championship with, relative success compared to the following year. But nonetheless, it's the same story from 2019 to 2020. And I think they'll be looking to possibly achieve fourth place in the Constructors. I think they'll be aiming for both of their drivers to be in the top 10 minimum. But if we look at the facts, will they get fourth place? Will they get third place? I doubt it. That car isn't as aerodynamically efficient as they want. The engine, although all the upgrades are coming through, it won't be as good as it was in 2019. If you want to believe that if they were cheating or if they weren't, I think that debate has been well and truly stomped out now, and we don't need to look at that anymore. But I think they have a long road to go, and 2022 will be their best option to win next time. If they can't achieve third or fourth, I think fifth place, one better than they will be last year. I think they'll be around there fighting with Alpine.
Hannah, it's a really good opportunity for Carlos Sainz. It was a huge risk he's having to take. Leaving a team that's coming back in form like Mclaren to go to a really prestigious team like Ferrari, who have been on the back foot in 2020. How big of a gamble is he taking joining the Maranello squad?
I think, to be honest, he's taken a massive gamble that I think possibly could or is likely to backfire on him, often through circumstances beyond his control. I feel like he knew, as well as most of us did, that McLaren were on the up. He was top dog at McLaren. Yes, Lando Norris was incredibly competitive with him, but he, as the more experienced driver, would have had the opportunity to kind of push the team forward. And I know they say, if there's one team you don't turn down on the grid, it's Ferrari. Every driver, as much as they say they don't, probably does want to drive for Ferrari because they are the most historic, the most prestigious team on the grid. But Ferrari just look like they've got no direction, and the problem is Carlos Sainz isn't coming into a Ferrari that's strong. He's coming into a Ferrari that's weak, that needs to rebuild, that may be forced to look towards its future. And to be honest, I think they've already decided their future if things go their way. We all know full and well, if they want Mick Schumacher in that second Ferrari, it's a tale as old as time, and it's something that you can tell the team are heavily pushing. And unfortunately, it could end up being that Carlos ends up being a placeholder for Mick Schumacher or Robert Schwartzman or one of the other juniors, depending on their performance. He could, to be honest, he would have to outclass Charles Leclerc consistently in the points on and in the standings to stand a chance of staying beyond the team for 2 years. So he can't have that time to settle in that a lot of other drivers get. He needs to prove himself from the get-go, because we all know how the media is. Race by race, people will be doubting whether he deserves a top seat. And if he can't help build that Ferrari car and make it improve, then I can't see a future for him.
Carlos Sainz is one of the drivers who are highly rated, but what I do not want to see is his career being dented over a mediocre time with Ferrari. What does he need to do to beat Charles Leclerc, apart from finishing ahead of him, of course?
Well, you've given me the obvious answer, but I will elaborate. Basically just not do what Ivan Capelli did when he was paired up with John Alesi for a hand grenade in his own career. I think Carlos is going to push Charles just a little bit more. He won't push him like Seb did, because Sebastian, is one of the best qualifiers out there. He still is, even though Hamilton's taken his mantle. I think Sainz needs to get everything together, really. At McLaren, I felt that his qualifying was a bit average at times. I think that sounds harsh, but at times he was back in Q1, and then he would have to make these charges through the order, which earned him the smooth operator nickname. So he needs to improve on his qualifying, needs to improve on his racecraft at times, and sometimes it is very, very average at times, and he makes silly mistakes, like at Mugello, for example, when he spun and nearly wiped out Vettel on lap 1. So he needs to get his mistakes at Ferrari and put them aside and become a better driver and beat Charles. Work hard every time you get into that car. When you do testing, take every opportunity you get and wring every little bit out of it. Find out Charles's lines, find out Charles's telemetry. He's basically just got to do a truckload of homework. Look into where Charles puts that car and try and put it exactly where it is, but quicker. That's the only way he's going to do it. Because at the moment, it's stacked against him. As Hannah said, Schumacher's basically... Well, it's a done deal. It's fate. Schumacher will be in a Ferrari. There's no question about it. You've got Schwartzman as well. You've got Ilott. So he needs to put his foot down, make a mark for himself. Otherwise, he will, unfortunately, end up like Ivan Capelli and be out of Formula One a year later. So he's got to be careful.
On to AlphaTauri next. Pierre Gasly, who famously won the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, he remains with the team, and he's got a new teammate alongside him. That is the F2 race winner, Yuki Tsunoda from Japan. And it's only a few years ago, Hannah, since Tsunoda was racing in Japanese Formula 4. Now he's got the opportunity in Formula 1 with AlphaTauri, and to my eyes, he could be one of the surprises of the season.
I agree. I think, to be honest, Yuki Tsunoda, I think, has caught everyone by surprise because he's not one of those drivers I think was very much on people's radar, especially kind of last year at the start of the season. Is people thought, he'll be talented for sure, but he won't be where the front runners were. We all knew Mick would be at the front. A lot of people underestimate Callum, and a lot of the Alpine juniors or Renault juniors would be at the front. He was not anywhere near that. However, once we got on track, he has shown himself to be an incredibly dynamic driver, one that excels in his racecraft and is able to adapt to different circumstances. Unfortunately, robbed of a few victories that actually, to be honest, would have put him possibly second in the championship had circumstances gone differently for him. But I feel like he is actually, to be honest, Red Bull's hottest prospect at the moment. And if he has the benefit of Red Bull have learnt their lesson, they will not promote one of the AlphaTauri drivers after a year. They'll give him 2 years AlphaTauri to develop. Sergio Perez will probably stay at Red Bull for the moment. But if he is able to learn from Pierre Gasly, and that's what he needs to do ultimately, the same way Carlos Sainz needs to learn from Charles Leclerc. In Pierre Gasly, he's got an incredibly experienced teammate and someone that knows Formula One, that knows what you need to do, and ultimately, probably actually the most important attribute of a driver, to be able to be versatile and to bounce back from adversity. We also have with Pierre Gasly, you need to be able to sometimes take a step back when things don't go your way and move on and build from them and make you a stronger driver. And I feel like Yuki Tsunoda's got that talent, and he's got youth on his side. He'll be the youngest driver on the grid. I can see him having a long future in the sport and possibly a future Red Bull driver.
Would you agree with that, as Yuki Tsunoda in a Red Bull in a few years' time, or do you think he's got so much to learn first before he can be given the opportunity?
Well, Red Bull should not make the same mistakes they did with Alex Albon and Pierre Gasly and rush him in. Give Yuki some time. Tell Yuki, learn off Pierre Gasly, soak him up like a sponge. Because Pierre Gasly is a Grand Prix winner. He's fast. He knows that team inside out. He knows Faenza like the back of his hand. He's quick nearly everywhere you go. If you learn off him, one of the best in midfield, he should have no problem. And then when it comes time to either when Max leaves for Mercedes or Sergio Perez retires, Yuki should be ready. And I think he will do it. I think Red Bull have got a lot of generational talents on their books, like Johan Deruvela, Yuri Vips, Liam Lawson. But I think that Yuki Tsunoda stands out just a bit more because how quick he can adapt to things. Considering he's 3 years ago, he was in Japanese Formula 4 and nobody had ever heard of him. Now he's a big shot. He's in Formula 1 and he looks set to be the rookie who has the best season. I think he will go into Red Bull, but just don't rush him. You just got to give him time to learn, and then he will be in that Red Bull car. And then potentially, this is my hot take, he will be number one driver by 2023 at Red Bull, because he will be that good and he can build a team around it, because he is generally a quick driver and a good team leader, and also a good person to be around the team. You don't want to be around someone who is not very likeable, and Yuki doesn't have any of those bad qualities.
Well, Pierre Gasly had a phenomenal season last year and the back end of 2019 after he got demoted by Red Bull. But he's shown his raw talent within the team, and it's anyone's guess how well he could do this year. I don't know whether they'll get a race win, but I've got a feeling he could achieve more points than he did in 2020.
It's a real shame you have to ask me this question, to be honest, Tom, because I think Pierre Gasly is one of the only drivers on the grid that I genuinely have no idea about. In my opinion, although he's a Grand Prix winner, I am on the strict belief that race was Carlos Sainz's, and he was absolutely robbed, because he was running second during that Grand Prix, and it was a red flag that assisted Pierre Gasly into getting into that position. But nonetheless, Pierre had the pressure placed on him, and he won that race fair and square. It was his at the end of the day, and at the end of the day, he does deserve it. But there was a case of luck with that Grand Prix, and I still think I'm not saying that he's not talented. I'm not saying he's not one of the best prospects Red Bull's had in years, but I genuinely have no idea what the future of his career is, because where's he going to go? Is he going to stay with AlphaTauri? Well, that would probably damage his career, considering he's in the number 2 team. Can he go to Alpine? If Esteban Ocon doesn't have a bad year compared to Fernando Alonso, I can't see him going there. So I think realistically, his only place is probably at AlphaTauri, and he's just going to have to say to Red Bull, all right, you've got this young Japanese hotshot, I'm better than him, this is why, and completely wipe the floor with Yuki, to be honest. That is, in my opinion, the only way he can stay in that driver academy. So if he gets beaten by Yuki this year, I think that will be the biggest damage to his career since 2019.
Next team we're going to discuss next is Alfa Romeo, 8th place in the Constructors last year. They are one of 3 teams to keep the same 2 drivers. They are Kimi Raikkonen and Antonio Giovinazzi. And you have to say, for Kimi Raikkonen, this could well be his last season in Formula 1 altogether. And for Giovinazzi, well, he's very much fighting for his career. And with the likes of Robert Schwartzman, Callum Ilott and co waiting in the wings, well, this is very much do or die, really, for Giovinazzi. Because there were signs last year where I felt he put in a decent performance in a dogged car, to be quite honest with you. But he needs to be fighting the points a lot more regularly.
I think Gio will have his lucky socks on this year, because Kimi Raikkonen he's no slouch. Although it most likely will be his final year in Formula 1, he is still he's got the mentality of a racing driver, and he's quick at the end of the day. So if Antonio can beat Raikkonen, if he can score not regular points, because I don't think the car will be at that level, but if he can keep on the back of the midfield drivers and leave Kimi in the dust, I think he will set himself up to be the team leader for the future, and arguably lead some of the other Ferrari Academy drivers into Formula 1 and sort of let them learn from him in the same way that he learned from Kimi.
Ed, I don't know what to say with Giovinazzi, because it's very much, is he going to be good or is he not going to be good? But I think if he remains on the tail of that midfield, as Will's just mentioned, and he's doing much better than Kimi, I think for the sake of continuity, you would want to keep him there.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people sleep on Giovinazzi, myself included. Before last year, I didn't believe Giovinazzi was worth it. I think a lot of people think he's very inconsistent, and he is at times. But he makes some rocket starts. He's extremely good in qualifying. I think his qualifying record is decent. Correct me if I'm wrong on this. And I think he's learning a little bit more. And if he has a good season, you would be stupid to get rid of him. Because if you're going to have a rookie in that team next year, which there's a high opportunity because Callum Ilott is on the books at Ferrari, unless Mick Schumacher gets promoted, that team, I don't think Sauber would be particularly keen on having a full rookie lineup. So you need that experience with Giovinazzi. I think Giovinazzi is a very solid midfield driver. He's very consistent when he's on his day. When you give him a good car, he's easily one of the best out there. So I don't think people should really be looking at it and thinking, well, is it inevitable that he's going to be sacked? Because he dodged a bullet last year, he can dodge it again. And I don't think that it will be down to luck. I think it'll be down to his sheer talent. And if he ups his game like he did in the second half of last year, he should be in, no problem. So, don't write off Giovinazzi just yet.
Hannah, Alfa Romeo, it's unknown where they're going to be this year. I mean, I'm not too confident they will be as competitive as the likes of AlphaTauri, Alpine, and Aston Martin, but I think they're sort of going to be there and pretty much they're sort of underdogs to get into the points in some races. But I think their target has to be finishing above Haas and Williams again this year.
Absolutely. I feel like if they don't finish above those two, to be honest, what are they doing in the sport? Because there is a level of Alfa Romeo have a lot more funding than previously Williams had. It will be interesting to see how Williams fit into the equation, because I think they actually could look more racy, and with a lineup of George Russell and Nicholas Latifi, to be honest, I would argue look a lot more promising than Alfa Romeo do. I feel like they're one of them teams that, to be honest, have got their eye firmly on 2022. I think this is going to be Kimi Raikkonen's last season. It would be a miracle, to be honest, if he did any more. And I think Antonio Giovinazzi's saving grace is the fact that it could be Kimi's last season, because they'll look like continuity unless Mick Schumacher moves sideways over to Alfa Romeo. I feel like the team, to be honest, feel very much like Ferrari do, in that they're stuck with a lack of direction. We don't know whether Alfa Romeo is going to remain in the sport or whether they'll return to the Sauber name. And it just feels like they're not progressing. They feel very much stuck. If you look at the teams around them, look, for example, at AlphaTauri, they've gone from being the junior team to Red Bull, to be honest, more like a sister team, and now to us, more like a partnership. Is they've been able to develop their car not in the same way that Red Bull did and move up the grid on sheer merit, whereas Alfa Romeo has moved consistently further and further back to the point where they fight in the midfield on occasions, but more often than not towards the back of the pack. And I think they need to get their act together and look at the long-term future of that team, because if they carry on, they're going to get left behind and it'll be more difficult for them to fight further up.
And Haas are the next team we're going to be talking about. And I think one man who will most definitely be going into the season under quite a lot of hot water is Nikita Mazepin, because, not just with his on-track, his driving style and that, but obviously what happened off the circuit, which, he made he was a huge mistake. He came out saying that it was a huge mistake, and it's obviously caused quite a sentiment within the Formula One fan base in particular in this campaign, saying, we say no to Mazepin, and the hashtag going around on social media and so and so. But yeah, it's pretty much, I think only time will tell whether Nikita Mazepin has learnt his lesson on the track. Ed, we'll begin with your point on this, because Mazepin is not the most liked driver on the grid. We all know it, and we're not condoning what he's done off the circuit in that incident with when he was travelling in the car and he touched a girl's body inappropriately. What message does that send to Formula One and to the Haas team?
It sends a very bad message to all of us, not just young people in general, but to young men like ourselves, like me, you, and Will. We know full well never to do this. We know full well that if we did do it, our careers would be shattered. So for Nikita to do what he did, I think was incredibly wrong. To put it on Instagram stories was utterly stupid. Especially considering that his new employers would be watching. You've basically taken a flamethrower to your own popularity and burnt it alive. So I'm worried for Mazepin. Plus, you have his on-track antics, which have already infuriated Daniel Ricciardo, and that's someone you do not want to annoy when you're coming onto a Formula 1 grid, rookie, 21-year-old plus kid, and you're already annoying Mr. Happy, who never gets annoyed, never gets angry, but your antics have already, put a target on your back. He needs to mature urgently, and he needs to realise, he needs to come out and say, I did what I did, it was wrong, I'm sorry. Please, please, please forgive me. I will try my best to mature and learn. And then he needs, unfortunately, because it will probably never go away, he needs to show to everyone that he's worth it in the Formula One grid. Because I don't think that unpopularity was helped by the fact that he took the seat off Callum Ilott, who many were said around the time Alonso that seat was de facto his. So to steal that seat off Ilott infuriated a lot of people. However, we should be, as much as we dislike Nikita Mazepin, as much as some people dislike Nikita Mazepin, I'm not one of those included, although I believe his antics bring the sport into disrepute, we have to give him a chance to prove his worth on track. And if he doesn't prove his worth on track, then the questions may start again. Haas are set for a very tough 2020 season, dealing with the PR circus that is due to take place. So I think this year could be a baptism fire for all involved, but certainly more for Mazepin, because he has those problems behind him already.
Will, what's your view on the situation with Haas? Because the team they do not look ready at all. Or I say don't look ready. They most certainly do not look as ready as the other teams are. And with Mick Schumacher there, embrace him for his first season in Formula One, 30 years after his father made his F1 debut. It's I think it's going to be a real acrimonious season for Haas. And how do they go about tackling it?
Well, I think there's three parts to Haas's season, which is their two drivers and themselves. You've got Nikita, who obviously was signed in December, looked at, I'm in Formula One, good, now how do we mess this up? You've got Haas, which themselves are a team which, 2018, I can speak from experience, my father absolutely loved them. They were the guys taking it to the big guys, challenging for fourth. And the other day I showed him the car and he looked at it and just went, ugh. So I think realistically, Haas are going to have a season which is difficult. They're going to be at the back of the grid, no doubt about that. They've got two inexperienced drivers in a car, which isn't going to be quick. And you look at Mick Schumacher, this fantastic prospect for Ferrari, a gold mine for the PR department, really. They've signed Mick Schumacher. I think Haas realistically looked at this season and thought, we may be low on cash, but we're going to make a load of money in merch sales because we're going to market the hell out of Mick Schumacher. And me and Ed actually discussed this, about their merchandise that we've seen beforehand. And there's no sponsors. The team have, normally on a Formula One shirt, you'd see sponsors here, all over the chest. There's nothing. You've got your Alkali and that's it. And unfortunately, that is something which will plague them, possibly even to next year, because they couldn't afford last year to develop their already existing car. So the first thing that springs to my mind is, how are they going to afford to build an entirely new design of car? 2022 is nothing like anything the team have experienced before, and I think they will really struggle over the next couple of years.
Hannah, it's going to be a real struggle, I think, for Haas. And I don't know what your viewpoint is with the Mazepin situation and what he needs to do to clean up his act as much as possible on the racetrack, at least anyway, and actually show that he does care for other people. And I think only time will tell over the course of the year whether he has actually learned his lesson.
Yeah, it's a difficult one ultimately, because to be honest, Mazepin's reputation was not good prior to this incident. He'd had previous situations, such as in European Formula 3, where he punched Callum Ilott after a practice session. If anyone watched Formula 2 last year, there was an incident where it definitely came across that way on camera, was he drove into the second place sign rather aggressively and nearly hit Yuki Tsunoda with it after losing the victory on a penalty because of his moves on track. He's going to have an incredibly difficult task. The people that I think actually have the worst task is the Haas team. Ultimately, their situation is that car. It reminds me of Williams a couple of seasons ago, when they failed to get the car ready for the first day of testing. They're going to be at the back of the grid, save maybe wet weather or a miracle, they are not going to be where they should be. You'll also have a situation of it's going to be incredibly difficult to market the team. As Will said about the lack of sponsors, is that's going to force Haas to become reliant on Dimitri Mazepin, a situation you don't want to be in. For example, as much as people criticise Lance Stroll, he at least had the titles to back him up, was able to bring other sponsors in other than the ones that his dad brought in. You can market him to the fans, and he's a likeable character. Mazepin will have a strong fan base in some areas, but to the wider market and to a lot of external sponsors, they will not want to be associated with him, which ultimately binds the hands of Haas to keep him in the team unless they can find someone else willing to basically sponsor them to a level that exceeds it. I also feel like F1 will have to do more if he has a similar incident like this in the future, or doesn't show any remorse or apologies and doesn't move forward from it and show ultimately that what he did was wrong. F1 will have a lot of explaining to do, because I think now this is summarised for a lot of people how the experiences, and possibly in a female fan as myself, are in a motorsports community when it is predominantly still and traditionally a male sport. Ultimately, Formula One, if they want to stand by the We Racers One slogan, need to do more in these areas, and we can't continue to overlook them.
Last but not least, Williams. Now, George Russell, who had that one-off appearance with the Mercedes team in the Sakir Grand Prix, and he should have won the race, let's be honest. And he showed, in terms of his racecraft, that he's got what it takes to not only do it in the Mercedes, but also in the Williams. But he just needs to get that elusive first point in the Williams. Their target, for me, would be to finish above Haas. I think that's most certainly doable, and I think trying to finish above Alfa Romeo as well is doable. Will, where do you see Williams come the end of the year? Because they're under their first full season with Untitled Chapter. They've taken over from the Williams family now. Where do Russell and Latifi aim to be by the end of 21?
I think the 8th row of the grid is their target, above the Alfa Romeos and above the Haas cars, and I think on certain occasions possibly even challenging for points. Like you said, Russell hasn't scored a point in that Williams yet, and arguably Latifi came closer to scoring a point in that Williams because he scored, I think it was 3 or 4 11th places last year, and he was massively underrated last season, in my opinion, purely due to the fact that George Russell massively outperformed that car. I think we will see a Williams in Q2 9 times out of 10 this year. And like you said, Doralton Capital, brand new investment. They've got Jos Capito, Simon Roberts, brand new management scheme. And although the Williams family have done so much for this sport, they were just a bit too old-fashioned for the 2010s. And they did their best to stick to that motto of Williams first, the team first, our way of doing things. And I think now that they've turned around and said, all right, we'll take gearboxes, I think they're taking suspensions now from Mercedes after 2022. I think that will really help them in the long term, and this is going to be a building year into the future of the prosperity of the team, hopefully.
Yeah, and Williams are definitely one of the teams I'm most certainly looking forward to seeing progress this year, because although they didn't score a point last year, they've definitely made inroads from in 2019 with their car. So only time will tell whether they have continued their progression back up the pecking order. Hannah, for George Russell, I mean, he's got a good chance to shine this year, and if he does have a good season with Williams, does he get the Mercedes drive?
I would say yes. I think either situation you look at it, either Lewis retires and he gets it by virtue of that, or to be honest, Mercedes, hopefully now, I feel like after seeing what he did at the Grand Prix, everyone knows George Russell deserves that Mercedes seat. I can understand them giving him another year at Williams to learn and develop. We all saw what happened with Red Bull when you promote a driver too early. But his time is now. At the end of the season, he'll have 3 seasons experience in Formula. He will be able to bring that car forward and show the future of the team. Is ultimately George Russell, I think, race by race, season by season, he's become a more competent driver. He's become more versatile, more skilled, and honing his racecraft and having that level of adaptability, and also being able to outclass Latifi, being able to beat your teammate more often than not, also gives you a level of confidence and a belief in your own abilities, which if you carried through to Mercedes, I think would be pretty dynamite on track. And I feel like we all would love to see him versus Lewis Hamilton. But I would say overall, he just needs to make sure that he's doing his job at Williams at the moment. Is the one worry you can have as most fans of a driver is that as much as you want to see them go up the grid, he can't lose his head thinking of that Mercedes seat. If he underestimates Latifi and can't focus on developing that Williams car for the future, he could end up inadvertently getting overtaken by him by sheer either luck or ability. He has to focus on the now and develop himself, develop that car, and push Williams in front of Alfa Romeo, and that should secure him that seat at Mercedes.
Ed, Nicholas Latifi, I think there were sort of signs of rustiness. His debut F1 season was a baptism of fire. The championship was delayed due to the pandemic. But, he's got a good opportunity over a proper season now, if you want to put it in those words, to really, really take the fight to Russell and, put himself in the frame of maybe 4 points. Is that the target?
I think it is. I don't think Latifi did actually that bad. Considering everyone said he was the worst thing since sliced bread, everyone didn't rate him. He did pretty well for himself. He didn't disgrace himself at all. So I think he will do all right this year. I think he will push Russell a little bit more. I think that he keeps him honest. He keeps that team stable. So I think there's a very good chance Nicholas Latifi could be on the cusp of the point. But that all depends on the car, and it all depends on the luck of the draw with the race. But I don't think Latifi is going to be too far away this year. I think certainly with the fact Williams will be definitely not the worst car this year, that honour unfortunately will go to Haas. I certainly believe that Latifi is not going to be a pushover for George. I think George respects him. George knows him as a very tough guy to beat on his day. If the car is good, George will step his game up even more, and that will catch the eye of the Mercedes team bosses, because they'll know that he is not one who falls back and lets things happen. So I think really Latifi is going to have a decent year, and plus with the full campaign under his belt, he won't be under as much pressure to instantly deliver. He will have time on his hands, and he's got plenty of it. So yeah, I think it's going to be a good year for Nicholas.
Yeah, I think so too. That's your grid. Now let's talk about the calendar, because we have a record-breaking 23-round championship as we speak at the moment, subject to any changes due to COVID or any other reason. The championship begins in Bahrain on the last weekend of March, on the 28th of the month. Then it's off to Imola for the first European round of the season on the 18th of April. Then it's Portugal, confirmed as the TBC round on the 2nd of May, followed by the Spanish Grand Prix the following weekend on the 9th. Monaco is next on the 23rd of May. Then it's Azerbaijan, who will be racing behind closed doors. No fans will be able to attend. That's on the 6th of June, followed by Canada the following weekend. Then it's the French Grand Prix on the 27th. Then Austria on the 4th of July. Then it's the British Grand Prix on the 18th of July, which is a fair few weeks after the proposed plans of social distancing rules being eased completely in accordance to the government. But hopefully fans will be able to attend the British Grand Prix in July then. And then the last race before the summer break is the Hungarian Grand Prix on the 1st of August. Then it's the 4-week summer break before Formula 1 returns to Spa for the Belgian Grand Prix on the 29th. The Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort, that was meant to be hosting its first Grand Prix for 35 years last year, ended up being put back another year. That's been staged for the 5th of September. Then it's the Italian Grand Prix, the last of the triple header. So it's a Spa, Zandvoort and Monza triple header, with Monza the last of it on the 12th of September. Then it's Russia on the 26th, Singapore on the 3rd of October. There's the Japanese Grand Prix on the 10th, which is the last part of that second triple header. So Russia, Singapore and Japan as a triple header there. Then it's the US Grand Prix in Austin on the 24th of October. Then it's the Mexico City Grand Prix at the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez on Halloween, the 31st of October. Then it's the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, not the Brazilian Grand Prix, that is set to be staged on the 7th of November. But there has been questions over in terms of the contract negotiations for that. Then the Australian Grand Prix has been rescheduled to the 21st of November. It was meant to be hosting the open race of the season, but due to COVID, the event has to be postponed, and it's been pushed back to the 21st of November. And of course, they are reprofiling the circuit over there as well, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Then the newest circuit on the calendar, the Jeddah Street Circuit in Saudi Arabia, that is set to be the penultimate round of the championship on the 5th of December, and the last race of the season will once again, for the 8th year running, be in Abu Dhabi at Yas Marina on the 12th of December. So it's another late finish to the championship. So who's looking forward to which races are you folks looking forward to the most? Any of you can chip in on this one.
The first one with a full crowd. That's the one I'm looking forward to. That's because I feel that F1 needs its lifeblood of fans back. It was weird seeing those moments, like when Gasly won. There was no Tifosi cheering his name, and there was no moments of delight when Perez won his first race. There was something missing on a track front. I'm looking forward to Portimao. I really loved it last season. I personally championed for that race to be brought onto the calendar during the off season, and I got my wish. It was a very good race last time. It's got that up and down, side to side like a roller coaster, pardon the pun, texture of a circuit. You've got, it will be good with fans. It will be good for the drivers who like it. They think it's a challenge. It really is the perfect racetrack. I'm looking also forward to seeing Zandvoort with the banking, because I'm interested to see how much that changes with the dire degradation. And hopefully, with fans, it will be even better, because it will be Max Verstappen mania for the race, and it'll be such a good atmosphere. It'll be arguably one of the best of the season. Imola should be good as well, if they've improved it. And then Monaco as well. It's the crown jewel of Formula One. It feels weird we haven't raced out in nearly 2 years. And it really is the one that I think these guys will want to race even harder at, because it is arguably the last great bastion of road racing in Formula One that we have now. So it's a great calendar, and it excites me full out. We'll have 23 amazing races to go to. So this one should be a cracker.
I think the race that I'm looking forward to the most this year is probably Belgium, from my own perspective, mainly because I'm going to be there. 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, never mind, in 2018, it was my first Grand Prix, and I thought it was going to be a relatively good race. I was on the start-finish straight, and lo and behold, Fernando Alonso went over the top of Charles Leclerc. So I think that's probably the race that I'm looking forward to the most. But overall, in terms of watching it, in terms of reporting on it, those three supposed sprint races that we're going to see in Canada, Monza, and Brazil, I think they're going to be really exciting to watch in terms of just how they're received, how they go along, and if Formula One fans might enjoy them. Hopefully, fingers crossed, there'll be something to look forward to, and something which, you never know, might even continue into the future.
Yeah, we'll most certainly talk about those sprint race plans in the weeks to come. Hannah, what are you looking forward to most on this year's calendar, and which races are you most keen on throughout the year? Because there's plenty to choose from.
I think, 22 races, spoilt for choice. I feel like some of the races that are on last year's calendar, I felt they brought the best of them back, which is exciting to see, because to be honest, I was worried we were going to get a very mundane and boring calendar. I feel like, it's a difficult one. Zandvoort, I think, should be interesting. The Orange Army out with full force. I feel like the banking could prove to be a challenge, especially for a lot of the younger drivers and rookies still getting used to the car. Then being faced with banking kind of feels like you're throwing them in at the deep end. I would say heading over to Brazil, we all love Interlagos. It's an amazing, incredible track. There were worries that it wasn't going to be on the track and there was going to be a possible new circuit in Brazil. I'm thankful to see, at least at the moment, it'll be staying on the calendar for the foreseeable future, hopefully. And I feel like it just produces beautiful, incredible racing. But I have to admit, there's one track that I do not like, and that's Albert Park, but I'm actually, for the first time in a long while, excited to see it. It's not, I don't think it's by any means the best track on the calendar, and it tends to be quite a disappointing season opener, but considering it's the third race in the end, it could prove decisive in the championship battle, and that should be an interesting thing to see, considering oftentimes the season opener hasn't mattered in the championship battles previously, and so now it could throw up some surprises, hopefully. And also, I feel like gotta choose Silverstone being a Brit. I think if we were allowed to have crowds back, seeing Hamilton there in front of the crowds, possibly on his way to an eighth world title, the atmosphere there, there'd be nothing else like it. But I think a 23 race calendar is going to prove problematic. It's going to test the driver's endurance like nothing else. And I think, especially towards the mid season, before the season break, we could see a lot of drivers being caught out with blocking mistakes.
We are close to the end of the show, but it's time to answer a few questions from the audience, guys. Got a question from Grid Finder, and they want to ask, how do you think sim racing esports will be affected when real racing, F1 that is, gets started?
It's a difficult one. I would say sim racing, probably in terms of the audience levels, is going to be negatively impacted. The fact of the matter is, you're not going to have the same drivers, the Formula 1 drivers, taking part as much as they did during lockdown previously, and the audience numbers as a result will drop. However, I think it's important that they find their place within the sport, use it to complement Formula 1, for example, when there is a break in the season, using that time to fill the gap. For example, to be honest, right now is ideal because we've only got testing coming up before the races, getting those drivers in, and also utilising the reserve drivers. If you look at Williams, they have Jack Aitken, you have Callum Ilott, both of at Ferrari, both of whom will be doing kind of different endurance programs, utilising them as part of the series. But overall, I think esports is on and sim racing is on a better standing than it was prior to lockdown, and I'm excited to see how it develops going forward.
Yes, I would agree. Near the end, during the end of 2019, I think we all scoffed at esports as something fake and unoriginal and really a pile of rubbish. But it was the kind of thing we all needed during lockdown. I think the viewings will be catastrophically down. I think they'll be in the hundreds, maybe even thousands. And for that, Formula One needs to think of a new idea. So maybe an all-star race that they had last year when they had the guys like Johnny Herbert, Ian Poulter, Jensen Button coming along. Maybe we can get like David Coulthard in. Maybe we could get Fizzy Keller in. We could have an all-sort. We can have a basic. It could be like 1998 all over again, with modern day Formula One cars. I think that could get people in, because the esports guys, some of them have an attraction, but not many of them are that well known. But I think if Formula One play their cards right, they play their strategy correct, like in the week of the Grand Prix or the weeks, in between races, they get the viewers out, they pump out the advertising, they say this is the next big thing, try and sell it like they sell a Grand Prix. They could make it work. However, they better not follow the Formula E route of sacking drivers because they switched them during a game. I think that was ridiculous. Audi sacked Daniel Abt, so I don't particularly want to see a driver being sacked because they switched. So as long as they keep it fun, but keep it slightly professional and cars not flying all over the shops, they can make it happen.
I think on top of the professionalism that they need to maintain, there's also an element of, unlike Formula One, esports it's entertainment for people. Obviously, you've got the people taking part who see it as sport, as competition. The people who are watching it are purely there for entertainment. It's not anything to do with car development. And we need some good old-fashioned names in there, possibly even ones which will, and I hate to sort of be that person, but names which will draw people in. We need the likes of Formula One drivers, Lando Norris and George Russell when they're in the off-season, but also fan favourites, Pastor Maldonado. Imagine the crowds that would bring if Pastor Maldonado was doing an esports race in a Formula One championship. Although it might sound a bit sort of, oh yeah, let's do it for the laughs, it would bring the numbers. And imagine Pastor Maldonado, Taki Inui in the same team, going against George Russell and Lando Norris. Like, it sounds bizarre, but that is what esports can do. The bizarre is what it can bring, and at the end of the day, Formula One should probably take advantage of that.
Rob Helston has come in with his question saying, how much do you think Haas will be impacted if Dimitri Mazepin does buy the team?
Well, it will certainly get an influx of cash, that's for sure. And Nikita Mazepin will probably be on the grid for a long time. I think it would probably help Haas as a whole, because I think that team is... Unfortunately, there's a real lack of funds. Gene Haas does not look happy running the Formula One team. He doesn't look like he's getting money back for his investment. So I think if Dimitri Mazepin took it off his hands, I think there would be a lot of worries gone. I think they would be financially safe. They certainly wouldn't be popular. That's for sure. Unfortunately, that's the way things go. But they could get sponsorship from Russia. There's plenty of Russian companies who are interested in Formula One who would see it as a growing market, particularly in Russia, considering the fact that we've now had a Grand Prix there for nearly 7 years and it's grown every year. There's a lot of top-rated Russians coming through the junior ranks like Schwartzman. You've got guys like Sergei Sirotkin, who is still on the bench, really, and shouldn't be because he is a good driver. So I think we may see Russia get more involved in the sport. So Dimitri Mazepin may be onto something because he can have a whole country behind one team if he takes over Haas. But there is a but. How much money can he keep chucking in before if they don't progress? How is he going to keep going? Because there's only so long you can have in Formula One before you think this isn't a good idea. And if Dimitri Mazepin thinks, well, I'm wasting money here to finish 14th, he'll pull out click of the fingers, especially if Nikita gets bored. So I hope we see more than 20 cars on the grid soon. I don't want to lose to another team, regardless what you think of that team, because there's jobs on the line. There's people's bread that needs to be won. And if you remove the team, it turns into a domino cycle, which in this day and age we don't need.
I think as well, in terms of Formula One, you look at teams in its history, and people don't just remember the best characters. They don't just remember Schumacher. They don't just remember Senna and Prost. When people think of Formula One, they can think of controversy. That is just something which is a fact. Some of the best remembered characters by some of the older fans of Formula One, people who watched it in the 80s and 90s, Andrea Sassetti, Jean-Pierre Van Rossen, and at the end of the day, if compare it to theatre, for example, every show needs its villain. And unfortunately, although if Haas were to be bought out by Nikita Mazepin, people wouldn't like it, it would possibly be another thing which Formula One could possibly take advantage of, especially with the fact that Williams' story has become quite buddy-buddy with Dimitri Mazepin, and we could possibly see a Rich Energy and Mazepin combo. It could play into the hands of Formula One in terms of not openly saying, come on fans, let's hate this team or let's disagree with this team. But Formula One will understand that it could take advantage of a situation like that and have another Andrea Moda situation or have another Moneytron situation, because that would be remembered at the end of the day, and Formula One wants its history to be remembered since it's a 70-year-old sport. And although it may seem unpopular, it could be something which plays into the hands of everyone.
I think Hannah's just left us as she's needing to get off. But we'll answer one more question, guys, before we have to bring the show to an end. Izzy Holman's just come in with her question saying, how much of a threat will Alpine be to McLaren or Aston Martin?
I think it's difficult to say. I think Alpine will probably... If you ask me this question in a year's time, I will probably say yes. They will be definitely in the hunt. This year, probably not, no. I think they'll be closer, especially with the lineup they've got. But it's going to be a tough year for Renault or Alpine, as it is now called. So I don't think they'll be that close. I think we'll probably see Alonso get a few more podiums than Ricardo did. But that all depends on how Renault develop this year's car. So I wouldn't be confident.
I think whatever we say, to be honest, it's probably going to turn out to be wrong, because if we say Alpine's going to challenge, they're not going to challenge. If we say Alpine isn't going to challenge, they're going to challenge, because that's just the way of predictions. It seems that fate sort of doesn't indeed like predictions, but I think they'll be challenging McLaren once McLaren sort of maybe turn off the development a bit. I don't think they'll be anywhere near Aston Martin on track. Maybe we see the odd battle between Alonso and Vettel, which in all honesty would probably be a really good show between the old guard and their youthful teammates who themselves are good friends off track. We know that Lance Stroll and Esteban Ocon like each other, and perhaps we could see a battle between those guys, but I don't really expect Alpine to challenge the top of the midfield. Maybe sort of fourth place is what they're aiming for, but fifth place they can settle with.
See, for me, I don't see Alpine challenging McLaren or Aston Martin as much as people expect. I feel like Aston Martin, to be honest, initially I did think they were not going to be as far ahead as I now think they will. I feel like the Mercedes engine will also benefit that McLaren if they have been able to input it into the car properly. But Alpine just seem, I think it's going to be very much a learning curve for them. If you look, for example, new management kind of coming in for a lot of the key positions, they're going to be spending those first couple of races still developing that car and still learning the team. I also think I can see them pulling closer to McLaren and Aston Martin towards the end of the season because I've got a feeling they'll keep developing that car for longer in order to benefit from the fact that other teams will be stopping early. Because we know there's going to be a couple of teams on that grid that ultimately see it as develop it for maybe another 3 or 4 races to get that advantage towards the back end of the season where points could be crucial and push them up the grid. But overall, I think with having Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso in the car, compared to some of the other lineups, I don't see them having enough of a consistent driver base. Fernando Alonso will pull that car through anything. Esteban Ocon I'm less sure about, and I think he'll be outpacing several of the midfield drivers around him.
Thank you, guys, for answering those, as that is all we've got time for this week. Thank you to everyone who had sent in their questions to us prior to the show. Next week, Beth Smith, Dennis Ferreira and Steph Wansworth will be with me to review the weekend's F1 test in Bahrain. From Ed, Hannah, Will and all of us at Motorsport Week, it's goodbye.